I had a Gibson amp, an old mid-'60s Gibson tube amp rebuilt by this guy down in Memphis, and he really made it sound good by removing a bunch of shit out of there. Because at one point, Gibson made the best Tweed amps ever, you know, in like 1958, 59, 60, right in there. And then they changed everything when they got rid of the Tweed cabinets and went to a darker brown, and it changed the names and kind of everything, kind of like, you know. And what they were doing was they were trying to compete with Fender, and Fender had a cleaner, more trebly sound. So they said, well, what can we do? Well, they put filters in there to try and make the sound less beefy, you know. And whereas, you know, I have a 1960 GA40 Les Paul single 12 amplifier. It's like the original Marshall. I mean, it's just amazing, you know. Before they did that stuff, you know, it's better than any Marshall head I've ever played, you know. And all you do is just unplug the speaker and then take the output and put it into a, you know, 212 cab or 412 cab, and boom, it's like instant JTM 45, only better. Probably around 40. It's a GA40, so I would guess it's between 30 and 35, just off the top of my head. You know, that's what I would guess, just from kind of what I hear. It can't be more than 35 watts, maybe 30, who knows. You know, I would say the 58, 59, and 60s would be my favorites, because I think they really had perfected what they were doing at that time. It kept getting better as it, you know, and then after that it kind of went. But this guy, Robert Henson, you can take one of those amps down to him in Memphis, and he's really reasonable. He'll rebuild it for you. It's amazing. He makes good amps. I like that guy. I learned a lot from him talking on the phone. We were talking about transformers. I said, yeah, man, I blew the output transformer on my Bassman, and when they put in a Mercury magnetic new one, it didn't sound as good. And he said, well, that's cool. Those little transformers are cheap, man. You know, these things now, they're not made the same. The metal was, you know, different back then, and, you know, they're cheap. Leo Fender used cheap stuff, you know. And that's why they sound the way they do. They sound great, you know. And he suggested I try to, you know, find some other transformer. Well, I didn't. And I just found out, I called over to the amp shop where my amp's been sitting for 15 years. And they said, hey, man, we just got a Bassman transformer in out of an old amp. We're going to put it in your amp to test it. I said, all right. And if it sounds good, I'll buy it. Yeah. So, you know, I can't wait to see how that turns out. You should see the amp I'm playing through this week. It's a 61 Bassman that was in a fire. I bought it brand new back in the 70s, and it was in a fire in the 90s. And I didn't want to deal with it for several reasons, because it wasn't at my place when the fire occurred. And I didn't, you know, it was this friend of mine, you know, it was at his place where I'd been rehearsing, and I just didn't want to deal with it. He moved to a different place, and he was a pack rat. He had the coolest stuff, but you couldn't walk through his house. And so every time I went there, I was like, I'll go look at it next time, you know. Well, he passed away recently, and his brother, I contacted him. I got my stuff, and I was thinking I was just going to throw it away because it was so blackened and charred. You know, it's a blonde Bassman, you know, 212 cabinet and a head, you know. I was like, oh. I got to looking at it. It's like, well, you know, maybe I could, you know. And so I took it to those guys, and they called me at Nashville Amp Service, and they called me and said, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? Well, we scraped a lot of the stuff off your head and, you know, got inside there, and we plugged it in and turned it on. It works. I said, you got to be kidding me. So they completely tore it apart, cleaned all the parts. You know, they had the grill cloth on the front of the Bassman head. There was a little strip of that. It was gone. It was just melted off. And I thought the knobs were melted, but once they cleaned all the black stuff off, they were still intact. And they said, well, do you want us to recover this? Do you want us to win it? I said, no, because half the Tolex is still there and part of it's scraped off and melted, and it looks like something from, Mad Max or something, it's just like so cool looking. I was like, leave it, and they had to put new grill cloth on the speaker cabinet, and one of the speakers worked, and they sent the other one off and had it reconed, so I got it back. So now I got it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm playing through the head. I don't like those cabinets. They're good for one thing, surf music. And it has 2 JBLs in it in a closed back cabinet. And for surf music, that's what you want. Clean, lots of reverb, and the JBLs. That's, and a jazz master with flat wound strings. That's the sound,
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that cabinet's good for. I have a more modern open back cabinet that's a little bit larger with 212s that sounds better for country guitar.